I'd like to call this council and committee meeting to order. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are all gathering separately throughout this community are lands traditionally held by the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to reside in this area. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exception of Councillor Lubberts.
Thank you. There's no addendum this evening. I have a few announcements. And the first one is with respect to COVID-19 and the things that have been occurring over the past few days. We're embarking on a perilous period of the COVID-19 pandemic, one during which the number of people infected is surging upward despite our efforts to contain the spread. During the first 5 months of the pandemic, Fort Erie experienced 26 cases of COVID-19. During the past 6 weeks, with increasing regularity, Fort Erie has experienced 12 cases. The statistics indicate that recent cases are predominated by those under 40 years of age, caused by close or community contact. In view of the record number of cases experienced in Ontario, the Premier has halted further steps to reopen society and placed revised restrictions on gatherings, indoors, outdoors, and within families. The health and safety of the residents in Ontario and in Fort Erie and Niagara remain the focus of actions by government and public health authorities. The basic health guidelines for individuals to follow remain the same. Maintain physical distance from others, wash your hands frequently, don't touch your face, limit your visits outside your home, wear a mask inside public places. But we need to remember some of the earlier advice proffered by health authorities. Go for walks, get exercise, enjoy the outdoors, maintain contact with loved ones at a distance by using technology available. We're all in this together. So let's recognize the importance of doing everything we can to protect those around us, our loved ones, family, friends, neighbors, and those we come in contact with. The ability to manage this crisis is in our own hands. By and large, the overwhelming number of residents have been following the public health guidelines. Now everyone needs to get on board. We are not going to eliminate COVID-19, but we have the ability to limit its spread and reduce the costs of the pandemic, personal, economic, and social. There is no excuse for irresponsible conduct or disregarding the essential public health guidelines and provincial orders. COVID-19 is serious. It strikes people of all ages, all ethnicities, all genders, anywhere. It can be deadly. When it is not, it can result in long-term health conditions for those who have been infected. That in itself should be a motivator for people to get with the program. If you become infected before you test positive, you are a spreader of the virus. Those you come in contact with are at risk. That could be family members, young and old, friends, those you encounter in a store, a restaurant, a gathering, a health facility. You could infect a nurse, a store clerk, a teacher or student, your best friend, your child, or your parent. No one has that right. What we have in this time of peril is responsibility to everyone in our community. I urge all residents of Fort Erie to be vigilant, to be cautious, to follow public health guidelines, provincial orders, and municipal bylaws. In essence, to be good citizens. Those around you are depending on it. The second item I wanted to address had to do with broadband connectivity. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance and essential nature of reliable, fast internet as a means of communication in our lives. While that service is available in most of the built-up areas of Fort Erie, it is not in our rural and semi-urban areas. What was once considered a luxury is now a necessity. Whether for business, education, governance, or maintaining connections with family and friends, the internet is now as essential in our daily lives as electricity, running water, natural gas, the telephone. While I and town staff have had meetings and discussions with major and minor internet service providers over the past several years, the pandemic has given a sense of urgency to our efforts to meet this vital need for our residents and businesses. Town staff has been working on a strategy that is and has consulted the community with respect to internet connectivity. I've decided to establish a task force to assist and facilitate the town's efforts to complete a strategy, establish a roadmap forward, prioritize areas of need, identify which service providers can and will meet specific needs within the community, remove obstacles to the installation of broadband in our community, and work with upper levels of government for funding and support. The ultimate goal is fast, reliable internet for every residence and business in Fort Erie. The task force will be made up of town staff, including the CAO, Economic Development Services Manager, and IT Manager, Councillors Butler and Dubanow, and several, perhaps 4 or 5 members of the community, and we will commence work without delay. And I want to thank Councillors Butler and Dubanow for agreeing to participate on that task force. And then the final comment I had is with respect to diversity and inclusion, an initiative that's recently been started. A small group of concerned residents, the Fort Erie Coalition on Diversity and Inclusion, has revived the notion of a citizens coalition to provide advice to the mayor and council with respect to diversity and inclusion issues. The group has met 3 times and has been drafting terms of reference to guide its work. Before finalizing those terms of reference, the coalition would like to expand its numbers to reflect the makeup of our community. The coalition will be advertising for new members, and the town will be facilitating the initiative by posting information on our website and social media. Over the years, Fort Erie has been known for welcoming newcomers and for being a progressive force embracing diversity and including everyone in the life of our community. This provides our community with an opportunity to continue to expand that vital work. If you're interested, please contact me by email through the town's website or Riley Zimack through the Fort Erie Native Friendships Center's website. We look forward to hearing from you. Those are the announcements for this evening. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, then there is a notice of an upcoming public meeting. There's a public open house with respect to an official plan amendment for housekeeping amendments to the official plan. And that public meeting takes place October the 6th. Is that correct? That's tomorrow night? That's an open house. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? And so that's via video teleconference. And to participate via audio, video, web, or telephone, send an email to Lindsay Richardson at the town. She is the senior community planner, and her email address is lrichardson@forterie.ca. And she'll be able to provide you information to join that meeting tomorrow evening. We do have a public meeting this evening with respect to a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment at 575 Garrison Road. And that will be the staff member who will be providing us with information on this is Anamika Dilwaria. And I understand that Mr. Butler, you're going to be managing who comes in and out of the meeting. Okay, so Ms. Dilwaria, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to be sharing my screen now. An application for a combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Adam Hawkswell, who represents 575 Garrison Road, Inc., owner of the subject property known as 625 Garrison Road and 0-10389 Helena Street. The purpose of the application is to permit a self-storage facility on the subject lands. Notification for tonight's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in the August 27th, 2020 edition of the Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, property owners within 120 meters were mailed a notice of the complete application and public meeting on September 11, 2020. This is an aerial photograph of the subject lands as well as the surrounding neighborhood. The The subject lands are located on the south side of Garrison Road and east of Helena Street in the Craft neighborhood area. This slide shows the surrounding land uses. The subject lands are currently vacant, and it comprises of 625 Garrison Road and 10389 Helena Street. The applicant is proposing to develop only the easterly portion of the subject lands at this time. The commercial developments are located on the north side of Garrison Road. We have Golden Nugget Bingo Gaming Center on the westerly portion. Dry industrial uses are located on the west side of Helena Street, and a former rail corridor is located on the east side. The subject lands are designated commercial in our official plan. The official plan policies do not permit public storage spaces in the lands designated commercial. The applicant is requesting an official plan amendment to add a special policy area designation to the lands to allow public storage, both indoor and outdoor, and commercial storage units. This slide shows the current zoning on the property. The lands are zoned site-specific C3-489, which allows the lands to be developed for a departmental store in addition to the already permitted highway commercial uses. This slide shows a natural heritage feature existing on the site and the vicinity of the subject lands as identified in the official plan. The natural heritage feature include a woodlot over 2 hectares in area, which shows to occupy a portion of the subject property, and provincially significant wetlands located to the east. An EIS was completed for the property in October 2012 and was reviewed by NPCA. The EIS concluded that what was mapped as a significant woodlot was in fact a thicket, and that a significant wildlife habitat species of concerns were absent from the site. NPCA concurred with the finding of EIS. The proposed development is also separated from the PSW by a retired rail line, which provides adequate buffer between the proposed development and PSW. This slide shows a proposed development which consists of 18 public storage buildings, 12 commercial storage units, 1 office space. And I also want to point out the planning report says that there are 90 outdoor storage spaces, but in fact there are 92. The applicant is providing a 3-meter landscaping strip along the perimeter of the property and also a closed board fence to screen the proposed use, the outdoor storage. This slide shows a site-specific regulation requested for the zoning change. The applicant is requesting to add public and commercial storage units to the list of permitted uses and is requesting a reduction in the minimum parking spaces. The zoning bylaw reviews public and commercial storage as warehouse buildings and requires 1 space for every 100 square meters of GFA, of warehouse space. The applicant is providing, so based on that regulation, we would require 99 spaces. The applicant is providing 40 spaces, and the ratio for parking would be 247.7, 1 parking space for every 247.7 square meters of warehouse space. And in addition, the applicant is providing 3 parking spaces required for the office use. This slide shows the public information comments that was held on August 13, 2020 via Zoom. The meeting was attended by staff, applicant, and 2 area residents. One of the residents had question regarding the servicing of the property. The applicant agent mentioned that the subject lands would be serviced from Garrison Road, and the proposed storm sewer system designed for the site will ensure abutting properties would not be adversely impacted. The proposed drainage system for the site will discharge on the existing channel located on the southeast corner of the site, and as this development would be subject to site plan control, the details of those site servicing would be dealt at the site plan stage. And the resident also wanted to know if there is a possibility of extending municipal service via the subject lands onto his property, which is at 900 Helena Street. And the town policies do not support extending municipal services via private property. So these are some pictures of the site. This is looking at the subject property from Garrison Road, looking north on Garrison Road, looking west on Garrison Road, east on Helena Street, looking south on Helena Street. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dilwaria. Are there any members of council that have any questions of Ms. Dilwaria? So I don't see any. I've got a couple of questions, if I might, Ms. Dilwaria. Presumably the change in that's being requested in the official plan and the zoning bylaw would be based on need. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship, that's right. That's one of the things that we would have to review when we are reviewing the official plan changes. Yes, that's
And
correct.
has that been established yet?
Your Worship, the applicant has submitted a planning justification report, and that report outlines that there is a need for this use in the community, and the report says that the existing self-storage facilities in Fort Erie are already fully occupied, and therefore there's a need for this kind of a development. But they have not provided us any market study, et cetera, no.
I guess it would be shocking if someone were asking for a change in zoning and didn't say that there was a need. I note that this is a 3.7 hectare parcel, and the density target here is 50 jobs or residents per hectare. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. But that greenfield target is for the whole of the municipality. It doesn't go on site-specific basis, but it's for the whole municipality.
So 3.7 times 50 would be 185 jobs, which would be the burden that, if not picked up on this site, would have to be picked up by someone else. Is that how that works?
That's correct, yeah.
So what is the cost to the developer for being able to avoid that type of job or density target and having to shift it to and having someone else having to pick it up? Is there a cost associated with that this developer would have to pay?
Your Worship, no, there is no cost. It would be up to the municipality that when we have future development, we'll have to make sure that we would meet that target for greenfield.
So do we have any idea how many jobs this particular facility would provide?
It's my understanding, speaking with the applicant, it would be 2 permanent jobs and 2 part-time jobs.
So 2 plus 2, 4 to max.
Four jobs, yeah.
More likely 3, which means that the shortfall is something in excess of 180 jobs for this parcel. And so then what would you know what, I'll hold off that. Are there any other questions that any members of council have? Then we will, sorry, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Just going on on some of the questions you asked. If storage, like I'm calling this a storage unit for lack of other words for it, do other storage units occupy, aren't they meant for commercial areas? Isn't that where you can put storage units in? Like you can't put it in like an agricultural area. Doesn't it have to be zoned commercial to be able to put a storage unit in?
Ms. Dilwaria.
Through your worship, yeah, usually these kind of self-storage facilities are permitted in the industrial zones. And that's the reason they want to have it in a commercial designation and a commercial zone, and that's the reason they're coming in.
Councillor Noyes.
Okay, no, that explains it. I was just wondering where you were going with your questions, but okay, so this sort of, it should have been an industrial zone rather than a commercial zone. And you're concerned about the jobs that may or may not be lost because of it. Okay, thank you.
Any other councillors? Then at this stage of the meeting, and I should have pointed out at the very beginning that since this is a public meeting under the Planning Act, council hears from staff and then we'll hear from the proponent or someone on the proponent's behalf. And then typically would hear from anyone who wishes to speak in support of the application and then anyone who wishes to speak in opposition. So at this stage of the game, we will go to the proponent or the proponent's agent if they wish to address council with respect to this proposal.
Your Worship, I'm going to bring in Mr. Emilio Raimondo into the meeting.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Raimondo.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city staff. I think Anamika has sort of adequately described the project. I'd certainly be willing to address any specific questions related to this development. I know there are a few questions related to number of jobs, the location and commercial use, the potential market. We've certainly found, I think our client in pursuing this location sees a great benefit in terms of marketability. I believe based on discussions with our client, there is a definite need for this type of development in the town of Fort Erie. The nature of the site in terms of the perspective notion of having a development of this type of use in a commercial zone, but I think one needs to look at the nature of the site itself, right? It's sort of off of Garrison. It's accessed by a very long driveway. It has a rail corridor to the I guess that would be the southeast side. One would look at sort of the type of development that could be placed on a parcel of that nature. And, you could definitely see perhaps why we've come to the table with a commercial self-storage type of development. The other thing is these types of developments, although sort of earmarked in industrial uses, in terms of how the bylaw or comprehensive official plan is set up, they also provide a complementary use to the commercial uses. So self-storage today are used by a multitude of commercial users, residential users. So I think one needs to give that consideration in the argument for their location. I think there was some concern and question about the drainage ditch, and our client is working closely with maintaining the existing overhand flows that are currently there. That would be a ditch along the east side, I believe, east side or south side? South side, where we're planning a retention pond. So again, although one might consider the location and zoning under industrial, self-storage today is a real complementary use and support use to some of the commercial uses as well as residential uses. And, from our understanding, they don't necessarily are fitting in industrial use. And given the type of development that's occurring along Garrison Road, we feel this use would be a highly complementary use, Mr. Mayor and members of council. And I'd be certainly open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raimondo. Are there any members of council that have any questions of Mr. Raimondo? Councillor Butler?
Your Worship, I'm just wondering if through you to Emilio, the facilities that you're proposing, are you planning on having bonding storage warehousing as well throughout? Like, is that a possibility that you're going to be utilizing those for bonding facilities?
I can't speak to. I know they try to keep. Our client has tried to keep a diversity of storage typology there, so that if there's certainly a market for that, I would say our client would pursue it. Mm-hmm. We've been involved. I'll be honest with you. Our firm's been involved in a number of storage units. We just completed one in Niagara Falls. off of the highway. Vultra Management is a company we've worked with that own probably about 10 storage units across Canada. They recently purchased a parcel off the 406 in Welland, and they're offering a diversity of, call it, storage typology within their facilities. I would say likely our client may be open to that approach as well, or providing some opportunity for that approach.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Your Worship. No further questions.
Any other councillors? I'll go to Councillor Zanko and then Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Raimondo. Are you familiar with the commercial area on Garrison? Have you had other projects in town as far as development?
We've, Councillor Zanko, like our firm is, we're familiar with that area of Garrison Road. We've done a number of projects in Fort Erie over the years. Again, it's developing, has a number of different uses that are occurring there. Again, I look at the characteristics of this piece of property. It's sort of an inward, it's pulled away from Garrison. It has a parcel on the front of it facing Garrison. It has another parcel that's being severed facing Helena. And then you've got this kind of residual piece that's kind of pulled away from the main artery, which is, call it this sort of, what would I describe this with? Kind of this long, narrow driveway that accesses this rear yard that's kind of landlocked by commercial development on Helena, Garrison, and then the old rail corridor. So one would question if a commercial development were to occur in that area of this sort of unique characteristic. I think by its nature, it would be limited, meaning that generally, commercial uses would gravitate to, parcels that have frontage on a street, especially Garrison Road, which is a main artery. It's got a lot of activity, yet this piece is sort of landlocked. So, its marketability would be questionable in terms of attracting, call it a commercial use that could fit that kind of complexion of the land. But in this case, self-storage is a very low-key type of use. It doesn't experience a lot of traffic, vehicular traffic. Generally, self-storage type of facilities that we have worked on are kind of off the beaten path a little bit in terms of call it engagement with the commercial sector, commercial type of uses. So again, I look at one of the decisions that should be considered here is, although it's a commercial parcel, it's sort of characteristics, it's sort of being an internal lot that's kind of landlocked with commercial properties around it, might make it more difficult in terms of its marketability. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, if I've sort of explained it right, but I'd certainly be open to more questions.
Yeah,
Councillor Zanko?
I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with it. I find it actually quite surprising, the area that you're proposing. It is a very popular area currently right now with development, but you did answer my question, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Dubanow?
Again, if I call it, am I still on, Aaron? Or, it's a flag lot, right? Call it a flag lot. Yeah, we know the perimeter around Garrison Road is certainly, prone to commercial development, but again, the characteristics of this flag lot, where it has limited frontage on a main artery, might be more difficult to market. But again, that's just our opinion, Councillor.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Raimondo. Thank you very much for appearing before council tonight. I do have a couple questions related to the property of a similar vein to Councillor Zanko. I'm just curious, you had mentioned that this was a landlocked piece of property, but during Ms. Delaria's presentation earlier, it appeared that the frontage on Helena Street is planned to be severed, which would essentially make this lot landlocked when, from what it looks like now, I don't believe it currently is. And I'm just curious why you're presenting a plan that has a long, narrow driveway down to Garrison Road rather than fronting onto Helena Street right now, using the whole property. I'm just curious what your justification for that is.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is part of a larger development in terms of the holdings, right, are owned by a land developer. So I guess from my understanding, again, it makes more sense to develop those parcels that are fronting on either Helena or Garrison. The driveway is already existing, so that long, narrow driveway is already in existence, or portion thereof. So I suspect the developer sees more potential in developing the parcels, and the future parcel to be severed along street frontage, because I think frontage is key here, right? Versus a longer type of, call it a larger development that might extend, that would be more eastward, I guess, towards the rail corridor. So I mean, that's, again, I can't speak to the wishes of the land developer, but certainly there's some rationality in terms of the ability to develop a larger parcel, right? And then what sort of and who you would attract, right? Anything could be done. You'd have to sort of market that entire parcel and develop that entire parcel. But perhaps smaller parcels are more marketable for potential development commercial uses, right? So that might be part of the rationale of why the land developer wishes to subdivide this parcel.
Thank you, Mr. Raimondo, and I do agree with you that frontage is key. I did have another question, though, Your Worship, if I may. You've mentioned several times the abandoned rail corridor to the east, and I'm just curious, at any time when this was being put together for presentation to the town and to council, had you reviewed our active transportation master plan and looked at what the eventual plan for that rail corridor was eventually intended to be as part of the community's active transportation master plan?
I'll be honest with you, Councillor, I haven't, but I suspect, like most abandoned rails, they'll likely be converted into more of a pedestrian type of public domain, similar to what the town has already done in some of the other rails through Stevensville, and so I suspect something along those lines. So although, I mean, you're right, it could, having that sort of public corridor link could be certainly beneficial to some of the commercial uses, but for the most part, they tend to be more developed for sort of leisurely activity, promenades, cycling, etc. And that very well could continue to occur. And the nature of the self-storage development would not affect that whatsoever. You're probably looking at how that might be able to capitalize on that type of pedestrian link into the commercial parcels, but we haven't considered that. Was there a timeline in terms of that pedestrian type of trail? Was there a timeline for that to be developed?
I would have to go back to planning to get the exact timeline. My understanding though that this is like a long-term vision and a master plan for the community to encourage more active transportation, pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods along those lines. And that's why I brought it up to just find out if that was anything you looked into prior to putting this this proposal together. But you did answer my questions, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor, at the time of pre-consultation, I believe it wasn't brought up at pre-consultation in terms of having us to address it, or if there were any impacts that we might consider in this development. So hence, maybe I'm a little reserved on my response there.
Are there any other councillors that have any questions of Mr. Raimondo? Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of questions. At one point, when you were doing the planning on your storage outfit, did you realize that your abutting property was also the neighbor in the abutting property was also doing the same type of project? And how would you tell me today what effect would having two storage sheds be back to back down in that area? Certainly would affect somebody's bottom line, would it not?
Councillor McDermott, quite honestly, we weren't aware of another developer planning self-storage. So the land developer and our client basically were working on this opportunity. So certainly as consultants, we weren't aware that there were two similar projects. We were approached by our client to develop this concept, and that's what we did. And I'm really not in a position to speak to or about whatever may be planned on adjoining properties. I apologize for that, but that's the truth.
I do apologize for the truth, Mr. Raimondo. Councillor McDermott.
Well, I guess I have a problem with the fact also that I believe that it could be inappropriate use of the land based on the frontage that we have onto the Garrison. Because I'm sure there's going to be a day coming when there's going to be a commercial project that would be significant enough to put in there. I don't think it's really limited in its scope, like you mentioned, but I do have a little bit of trouble that we're going to potentially have two storage places in one place, well, two lots, but in one area. And I'm not certain that the one is going to be able to be sustained, let alone any others, because I'm not that certain how much storage we need in this community. So this thing bothers me a bit. So I'll leave it at that, I guess. And thank you for your honest answer there. I appreciate that.
Mr. Dermott, I mean, you have, as council and as city staff, you have the opportunity to restrict the amount of development, right? So for example, if you see, we're before you, I can't speak to where the other development may be. Have they approached council or staff? Are they in the same boat? I mean, we're kind of ahead of the curve because we're before you, before them.
Well, actually, Mr. Raimondo, you're not, but
We're
that's neither here nor there. We're doing a public meeting on your property.
Okay.
And
fair
so
enough. Fair enough.
we're not here to answer your questions. That's information that you can obtain from town staff.
The
Councillor
other-
McDermott.
Just one other, Mr. Mayor, one other comment on the developer and owner of the properties. I think Mr. Compson, his name's been mentioned in the minutes, right? I mean, he's been very active in the town of Fort Erie in terms of development of a number of projects and plazas, some of which are on Garrison Road. And as a developer, he would be very akin to the marketability of properties that he owns in terms of commercial marketability. So I and again, just our opinion if that developer, with his knowledge of the development potential in the town and his ownership and development of various properties, has a good understanding of commercial uses, perhaps in his approach to sever the land, there might be some credibility given to them also in terms of understanding the potential of what can be developed on these lands. So, given the developer some benefit of the doubt as well, but I'm just going to leave it at that.
Councillor McDermott, did you have any other questions?
No, thank you, Worship.
Are there any other councillors that have any questions of Mr. Raimondo? So, Mr. Raimondo, you've made reference to the owner and the developer, and we've got the map that shows this particular parcel. I presume that the parcel adjacent, which fronts on Helena Street immediately to the west, is owned by the same party. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that owner is different than the developer?
The developer is the owner of these properties.
Okay, so they're one and the same person, or one and the same entity.
There's a developer who owns the parcels. I mean, we're here with this zoning amendment, but the amendment is based on the purchase and sale, right? So as it stands currently, the developer owns all of this property.
Okay, so this approval is a condition of a transfer of ownership? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think that's a fair answer, correct.
Okay, and so the parcel that's immediately north, which fronts on Garrison Road significantly, is that owned by the by the developer owner of the parcel that we're now talking about this evening?
We believe so, correct.
Okay, so what we will have is a new owner potentially on what's shown as the development area, or the
Correct.
parcel that's the subject this evening.
The
Which
flag
would mean
lot.
that, going forward, we may not have the ability to require the developer, the current owner of the property, to enhance the density target on the land to the west, which fronts on Helena, if the developer were to sell the parcel that we're dealing with tonight.
Well,
Have I
those
made that sufficiently confusing?
Yeah, I mean, those parcels are still under the commercial zoning in that map that Anamika put together. So, I mean, there's still, there certainly can be that opportunity. There can be.
So then that really gets, I guess, to the crux of my concern here, and that is we've got a parcel that calls for not a density target we've set, one that the province and the region monitor. It calls for 185 jobs, and we're told that this development is going to create 2 full-time and 2 part-time, which means there's a deficit of over 180 jobs in the density target. How do we make that up? Where's that? What is the owner developer's proposal for how we would make that up elsewhere in Fort Erie?
I mean, theoretically, that perhaps if this is all one parcel, and maybe Anamika could clarify that would be the number of jobs permitted on this acreage alone, right? So you have additional parcels that front on Helena and Garrison. So there can be potential, depending on the type of commercial use, that can make that up. Like, you've got to remember too, like the amount of development that the type of development in a commercial use could theoretically restrict the number of jobs as well. So, you might have an interesting commercial development that could be a real catalyst, but still can't comply with the requirements of the job, threshold. So therefore, council would turn that opportunity down to avoid and say, well, we can't meet the requirements of jobs, but we're going to turn down a gem of a commercial development. that could be a catalyst for future development. Is that realistic? Right?
Well, you're surely not suggesting that a storage facility would be a catalyst for future jobs.
No,
Or
I'm
are
not,
you?
no, I'm not saying that. A storage facility, basically, I mean, a storage facility is a storage facility. I mean, they're
Right.
very low employment there. But I'm saying for the other two parcels that form part of this parcel, right?
Yeah, okay, I'm not going to keep flogging that horse. I think everybody understands my concern. You did mention, Mr. Ramondo, that you have recently been involved in two storage facility projects. One that you mentioned in Niagara Falls on the highway, and I presume you mean the Queen Elizabeth Highway?
It's at the QEW and McLeod Road.
Right, and what was the zoning of that parcel?
I believe it was industrial.
And you also mentioned that you were involved with one, or maybe you are now, on the 406 in, I don't know
In
if you said
Welland.
Welland. Yeah,
Yeah. So that would be parallel to this. That's commercial. So I'll give you an example. This is the new development at line. No, this is it would be Woodlawn Road. Woodlawn. So behind Canadian Tire, they have a new hotel being built there. It's quite a large commercial development. So there's a large self-storage, and that's roughly about 80,000 square feet, 72,000 square feet, about 72,000 square feet. So that's right in the midst of, along the highway, right in the midst of a wholly commercialized area. And in the commercial use, it permits self-storage. And that's the city of Welland.
right. And the magnitude of this particular proposal is,
About 72,000 square feet, Mr. Mayor.
this particular proposal?
This one's about 60,000 square feet. Give or take 60,000.
Okay. I have no other questions. Any other members of council have any further questions of Mr. Ramondo? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Ramondo. Then we'll move on to anyone who wishes to speak in support other than the proponent of the application. Mr.
Worship,
Butler?
I'm just going to remove Mr. Ramondo from this area. Mr. Ramondo will go back in the attendee area. And for those of you that have been watching that are in the attendee area, you can raise your virtual hand using Zoom. If you're on a computer, you can click the participant button at the bottom of your screen and click raise hand. If you're on a mobile device or an iPad, tablet, there's another button in the corner of your screen that would say raise hand. That'll indicate to us that you'd like to speak. You'll be brought into this meeting. So we'll give everyone a few moments. We do have a number of attendees, Your Worship, but I don't see any hands raised. And we're seeing one now. I'll bring that person in, Your Worship.
Okay.
Is it okay to speak?
Well, are you speaking in favor of the application?
I am not, Your Worship.
Okay, so you're a little ahead of schedule. I see that you're Anthony Annunziata. Let's try to confine it to anyone who wishes to speak in support first of all. So, Mr. Butler, can you check to see if there is anyone that's indicated?
Your Worship, I'm not seeing any others with their hands. Oh, no, I apologize. I do see one with their hand raised. Again, this is in support of the application. Raise your hand now. Your Worship, I can move Mr. Annunziata back into the attendee area.
That's fine, and we'll bring him back shortly.
Your Worship, there's one member of the public coming in right now.
Okay. So,
You know, we can hear you.
Okay.
so we would need, could we have your name and address, sir, for the record?
Okay, my name is Gino Vindatelli. I own with a partner 575 Garrison Road, which is the north of the subject property. So I just want to clarify that it's not part, the same developers do not own the parcel north.
Okay, that's fine.
Want to
That's
make
fine.
that clarification.
The owner of the property that is the subject of this application on the agenda appears to be 575 Garrison Road, Inc. That's a different corporation than the property owner where you're located, which
Correct.
happens to have the same address?
Correct. Actually, the owner of 625 Garrison Road is, or
That's,
actually owned our parcel. It was one complete parcel, I think 21 or 23 acres. And I guess they owned it under 575 Garrison Road Incorporated, severed our parcel, which is 8.32 acres, and we purchased it.
okay, that's helpful.
Although the name of the owner sounds like our property, they don't own our property. It's separate.
Right. And did you want to make comment with respect to the merits of the application in support or? not?
We have no problem with it and we have no objections. I just wanted to make the clarification.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Do any members of council have any questions of Mr. Vindatelli? If not, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Butler will go to anyone else who wishes to speak in support of the application.
Your worship, I'm seeing no other hands raised at the moment in support of the application.
So let's give it one more shot. Anyone else who wishes to speak in support of the application? If not, then I'm going to go to anyone who wishes to speak in opposition, and that would be Mr. Annunziata. So could you bring him back, please,
Bring
Mr.
Mr.
Butler?
Annunziata back in, your worship.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship,
Good evening.
and council.
And your
Thank you.
address?
Sorry,
Your address, please.
I live at, I'm the owner of 900 Helena Street in
Okay.
Fort Erie.
Go ahead.
And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address council this evening. As I said, I'm the owner of 900 Helena Street, which is a 29-acre parcel that shares the southern property line with the applicant. I've owned the property since 2009, and I just want for clarification on a couple of items and make a few comments, but give you some context. In 2016, the town of Fort Erie underwent an official plan change for these Helena lands. It was determined by planning staff at the time and supported by studies to change the land use for my property and the surrounding properties. My property at the time was zoned neighborhood residential. At the time I purchased it, and it was changed to a dry industrial use. This dry industrial use provided a variety of uses, including public storage. I proceeded to investigate the feasibility of using public storage on this site. I hired a consultant to prepare a feasibility and demand study that examined everything from new residential development, existing commercial development, zoned lands, existing supply and proximity of any competition, and competitive developments. I then proceeded to invest what's now turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars in site plan approval, engineering, architectural, and deposits on materials. For everybody's knowledge here, the site to the south, 900 Helena Street, is site plan approved for 180,000 square feet of storage, public storage. The applicant is applying, just to be correct, in the applications in front of you, for 107,000 square feet, not 60,000 square feet. We have this site plan approval, which I did send through to planning so that they would be aware. And I think it probably deserved a little bit more consideration in the analysis that there is a significant amount of supply that's site plan approved. And I applied for building permits back in March for this site, and I'm just waiting for building permit approval at this time. An official plan amendment is quite a significant planning consideration, and it requires a higher standard of consideration than simply a zoning amendment. For this reason, I'd just like to point to the fact, and obviously you've addressed it through this discussion, that the application does not currently meet the provincial policy standard of 50 residents and jobs per hectare. As it stands, instead it suggests that the westerly portion of the lands, which the applicant is applying to sever, would somehow meet this provincial standard in the future. I'm not sure in what world the developer would look to develop C3 commercial uses on Helena when Planning and Town Council will have signaled the market that the C3 commercial use will not work on Garrison Road, which has 20 times the vehicle traffic and has and thus has changed the use for the site to an industrial use. If Planning and Town Council do not believe C3 commercial land use is appropriate for the center of Fort Erie, at the center of the commercial hub of Fort Erie, where it's a contiguous commercial area, then why does it believe it'll work on Helena Street? It seems to me that if the city or the town wanted to look at this commercial area and continue to look at advancing the commercial interests of the center of Fort Erie, then it would maintain its commercial C3 zoning. On page 100 of the report in front of you, it suggests that this operation will have shorter hours of operation and somehow that these facilities would operate and be less disruptive. And the applicant's agent was making that reference. Normally, public storage facilities are gated facilities that operate 24/7 with a carded system. So there is certainly not a lesser use or standard of use for this particular application. The other point is the applicant is attempting to create a new definition of a term called commercial storage. And in fact, there is no such term within the usage designation. And in fact, it is an industrial use. Whether it's for small commercial operators, it is an industrial use. It's a light industrial use. And for people who will rent out those uses, which is an intended use that I have in my proposal for my site plan, is to provide for those very exact same uses. The applicant is looking for a 60% reduction in parking requirements, meaning that the 99 parking spaces are required. He's proposing simply 40 parking spaces for that site. The applicant is trying to use a C3 commercial standard in applying the lot coverage for this site. C3 commercial provides for a 60% lot coverage for this particular location, when the appropriately zoned locations, like mine to the south, only has and provides for 30% lot coverage. At the open house, I expressed significant concern about the applicant's stormwater management plan. It was noted on page 108 of your package that it will be required, or the applicant will be required to obtain permission from adjacent property owners to outlet on their properties. Just so council knows, to date, I haven't received any such request, and furthermore, would not support any such request. Lastly, I'd like to point out the concern expressed by the region over access and traffic management, access to the property off Garrison Road. It was not clear from the application as to what that might look like, and no detail has been provided. I think that's a significant concern when using Garrison Road as a commercial corridor and access for this particular use. I think it would be a significant consideration to have for the public to comment on. Those are all the comments I have this evening, with the exception of one. Mr. Raimondo is very well aware that I am a partner with David Compson in other properties. In fact, Mr. Raimondo is our architect of choice for that particular project. He knows very well that Mr. Compson is not the developer of this project and has offered no support for this project. In fact, he'd be offended that his name was used as an attempt to convince council that somehow his reputation is attached to this development. I can tell you without reservation that Mr. Compson is not attached to this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Annunziata. Did any members of council have questions? Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Annunziata, thank you very much for coming this evening. I wanted to confirm, you mentioned earlier that the zoning of your property on Helena was dry industrial. So you have a permitted use for storage on your property. That's correct?
I do. That is one of the permitted uses with the zoning on my property.
Okay, so you didn't require, at least not during my time on council anyway, I don't remember an official plan amendment or a zoning bylaw amendment or anything along those lines for your property, and no applications along those lines were made by you, is that correct?
None. In fact, my site is 100% compliant and is already site plan approved by staff for 180,000 square feet of commercial storage.
Okay.
Or,
Thank you.
sorry, public
Yep.
storage.
Thank you very much. And Your Worship, if I may just one quick thing. Now, I'm guessing you've done a market analysis and you're aware of the other storage facilities, legal facilities anyway, that currently exist in Fort Erie. Is that correct?
I have.
Okay. So if I believe there are two other storage facilities, and I could be wrong, there may be others, but I know of at least two right now that are legally operating in Fort Erie. One of them is on Gilmore Road, which I believe is zoned industrial right now. And the other is located on Bertie Street, actually not too far from where I live. And I believe that's zoned Prestige Industrial, if I'm correct. Now, when you were going and doing your market research and other things related to this development, was that a consideration that you looked at? Was the existing storage facilities and their land use and how yours would be compatible and tie into that?
Yeah, one of the important considerations for investment, I mean, the entire buildup for this project is about $7.5 million. So we needed to assess specifically what the current demand was, and we needed to understand what the current supply was. The market is underserviced, and that's why we went forward with the site plan application that we're doing. We are building it out in phases, simply to allow the municipality to absorb the inventory that is brought online. But I can tell you that what we have site plan approved far exceeds the demand that currently exists in Fort Erie. But given the surrounding areas of new residential development, new commercial development, that all factors in to the utilization factors that work into these public storage units. And we had completed a fulsome analysis of that. And it's proprietary to us, but we had completed a fulsome analysis.
Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mr. Annunziata, for answering those questions. Thank you.
Any other councillors? Thank you very much, Mr. Annunziata. We'll go to anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the application, if there is any. You're keeping an eye out, Mr. Butler?
So again, just those in the attendee area, if you do wish to speak, you can please raise your virtual hand. I'm seeing none, Your Worship, but I do have just a comment in the chat area, and I think I'll read it in if that's okay with you. This person stated that their camera and audio are not working on their computer. If that's okay, I'll read this in.
Sure.
So it just says, my name is Ben Koo, owner of 44 Garrison Road. I have a question regarding traffic. Is the site allowed to have a full turning capacity? And Amika, as you are aware, we are working with our traffic consultant for a new traffic light for the future residential development on our site. Due to the exit entrance off of Garrison Road for this development, how much traffic would add to our study? Can you send us the traffic study of this proposed development?
Thank you very much, Mr. Butler. So Ms. Dilwaria, maybe you could, if you can respond to that, maybe we'll do that right now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Regarding the traffic study, the issue about the traffic jet that would be generated by this development, Garrison Road is a regional road, and as part of the application, region had not requested for a traffic study. So typically, but self-storage units are, they do not generate so much amount of large volume of traffic. And regarding the access issue, it might, because region did not comment upon whether it would be a full access or a half access kind of a thing, I assume it would be a full access on Garrison Road. And we do not know how much traffic that would be generated because a no traffic study was required by the region.
Thank you very much. So that does raise the question of whether this is right across this point of access, 625 Garrison Road, is directly across the street from the development of the 3 new restaurants, is it not? Ms. Dwyer?
Worship.
So is there going to be, are you aware of any restrictions on traffic crossing lanes in that vicinity? Or is it your understanding there's going to be some type of signalization, new signalization?
That's, Your Worship, that's my understanding that region is looking into installing a signal, but they need more information. And that's why they're doing a traffic study. And any future development that's coming in, they are requesting a traffic study to ensure whether a signal would be warranted at that location or not.
But they didn't ask for that on this particular application.
That's
Thank
correct,
you.
yeah.
Any other members of council have any questions of Mr. Koo? I know he can't respond verbally, but he apparently has the ability to send us a message. If not, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And I want to thank all of you who participated. And we're going to move then to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Are there any reports that anyone wishes removed from the consent agenda? If not, could I have a mover for the consent agenda? I see Councillor Zanko first. So those items are on the floor. Are there any questions or comments? So the consent agenda includes the 2021 budget timetable and comments. So Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to address 3 of the submissions. So first of all, CAO-17-2020, and wanted to thank you for having that report come forward. I was really impressed. It was eye-opening for me because I didn't realize how much the municipality was already doing. And knowing that this is a very important topic, I'm looking forward to moving forward with more recommendations and seeing this team put together. I did want to talk about the CAO 20-2020 and wanted to congratulate all those involved in that $49,000 rebate that's coming our way. That's very impressive. And I have to say, again, I know I say this every year when this comes up, but it's so difficult to get that kind of capital out of WSIB. So I'm really impressed that Keith Rothney was, and I believe it's him that was able to do that on behalf of the municipality. And then that just goes hand in hand with CAO 21-2020. And again, every year I say this, but when I take a look at your health and safety for the municipality and know how large you are as a community of employees, it's very impressive to me that there is always continuous improvements, because it's very important for our people to be trained in order to have those core competencies and make sure that the environment is safe, not just for the people internally, but externally as well. So I just wanted to say kudos to everybody.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butler. And those comments are all well taken and I'm sure well deserved by staff. Some of these reports that we receive are excellently written. They provide us with very detailed information which assists us in making our decisions. And the fact that a municipality of this size with this number of employees could run for over 1,200 days without a lost time injury is really quite startling. I know that whenever the health and safety banquets are held, and of course there wasn't one this year, representatives who come in here from WSIB or private consultants laud our employees for those who are managing, those who are also doing the work, because it's really a team effort and it does save, as you'd mentioned, last year $49,000 and each year during that run of no lost time injuries, the municipality has saved money. So your comments are very well taken and certainly well deserved. And it is truly a team effort, so we're very fortunate. Any other members of council have any comments with respect to these? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. In regards to the budget, report 2020, and I do see, and I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Jansen earlier today in regards to the, I think it's 3.9 for the levy and 2.9 water. That I thought it was a bit high for to be looking at that type of increase for next year. Then talking to Mr. Jansen, he indicated that is kind of like in the planning stages, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I understand through perhaps other levels of funding and some money that may come from other levels, and also using some of our reserves and things, that hopefully that those numbers will be reduced and it won't come in as that. But I don't know if Mr. Jansen wanted to comment on that.
Well, Councillor Noyes, that's in our hands, and I've also had an opportunity to chat with Mr. Jansen. He thinks I'm the Grinch that stole Christmas, but you know, we've gone through some very difficult economic times, and our staff has been very good at and very diligent at finding ways to mitigate the lost revenue that we've suffered. However, we do have residents and businesses that are suffering economically, and I think we all have an obligation to sharpen our pencils and get staff as much information as they can so that they can sharpen their pencils, because we're starting at a level that many municipalities end up at. So there's a good message there because we've got the ability to work on these. And yeah, I'm not particularly happy with those numbers, but this is staff's opportunity to point out to us where they think the pressures are, what they think the opportunities and priorities are. And, you know, we're very fortunate because among all the other staff, senior staff who are very good, we have Mr. Jansen, who is very frugal. If I didn't know otherwise, I wouldn't know that he comes from Mennonite heritage. But yeah, Jansen is very frugal, and we're fortunate to have him there. So are there any other councillors, or did you have anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing further, thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, then I'm going to call the question on the items in the consent agenda. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And that then takes us to Planning and Development Services, and that's you, Councillor Zanko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We do not have any presentations or delegations this evening. That will bring us to report PDF 39-2020, intent to amend Schedule A of bylaw number 135-99. And I believe that was already moved, Madam Clerk, so I don't need a mover. So that report is on the floor for questions and comments. Your Worship.
Yeah, Madam Chair, did we, since we received a memo from staff with respect to the owner of the property not having yet responded, have we had any response since then?
Ms. Dolch, perhaps you can confirm.
Through you to His Worship, no, we have not. We have not heard yet from the owner.
So I don't want to cut anyone off, Madam Chair, but my view is that until such time as we hear from the owner and the owner is prepared to come to respond to questions that we have with respect to a heritage property that's been allowed to deteriorate to the point where demolition may be its only fate, we should simply defer this. And so I'd like to move that, but I don't want to cut anyone else off who might want to speak to this.
Sure, I can come back to you, Your Worship. I can open the floor to other comments or questions if there is any. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. I'm just wondering in regards to the safety of this particular building. By its description, it's perhaps unsafe, and I'm just wondering if it's not demolished, are we putting anyone at risk that should enter that building?
Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the councillor, we have put some safety measures in place to make sure people aren't approaching the building, things like that. So we can look further into that to make sure everybody remains safe. But I don't believe, I know the building's in rough shape. but it's not in a condition where it's going to fall down at this point in time. It depends how long we're waiting on the deferral, obviously, but hopefully we do hear from this owner shortly.
If I have one further question, Councillor Zanko,
Sure.
in
Yeah.
regards to the businesses that are near it or beside it, how is this building negatively affecting them? Like, do the neighbors want it down?
Ms. Stoltz?
Through to the councillor. We haven't heard from any neighbors. There is to the north, there was the former gas station site along Ridgeway Road. That's not being operated at this point in time. To the south, we do have a home, but we haven't heard from residents on this report anyway, or this demolition at this point.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Is there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, so I will go back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to move that we defer consideration of this report until the owner attends a council meeting to respond to questions regarding the property.
Okay, unless there's any questions on the timing of this, then all those in favor? Okay, that passes. That brings us to report PDF 43/2020, proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 625 Garrison Road, 010389 Helena Street. Can I get a mover? Councillor Dubanow. Are there any questions or comments with regard to this report? Councillor Dubanow, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Butler, I've seen his hand first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Very briefly, I asked the proponent as well as Mr. Annunziata earlier some questions which helped clarify the situation. This property is located in Ward 2. It's located at one of what I would say is perhaps, anecdotally, one of the busiest intersections in Fort Erie. Garrison Road is a corridor that is right now brimming with opportunity and growth, particularly mixed use, a combination of commercial as well as residential. We identified in our housing study last year the need for, I believe it was 2,000 apartment type suites in the community. And a lot of that opportunity is going to exist on Garrison Road because it is compatible with an existing area and doesn't interfere with established neighborhoods. I'm having Mr. Annunziata here earlier explain his situation with his property, which is already zoned and compatible with the official plan. And then this here, I'm really not keen on this. I'm very concerned of what it could do to land use in the area, having a storage facility on what's a commercial corridor. And just briefly, I think back to some of the things that we've done in the past that seemed like a good idea at the time that came and kind of bit us later on. And the one that I always go back to is Crystal Beach. That was a different place back in the 80s, and it may have been a good idea to do there what they did at that time. Now that we have seen what that area has become and the opportunity that's there, maybe in hindsight, we should have done things differently. And as the councillor for Ward 2, who knows what could be happening along Garrison Road in the upcoming years, I don't want to potentially make a similar mistake. So I will not be supporting this evening. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions sorry, Councillor Butler?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I read this a couple of times and I have a problem with this too. I won't be supporting it either. And the main reason I'm not going to support it is because I feel that Garrison Road is the main artery to our town. And I think it has so much more potential than to have a facility that's mainstay is for storage. I don't think it's the place for it. I believe that Garrison Road has an opportunity to not only enhance commercial space, but also to build up and have a mixed use of commercial and condominium structures and apartment structures. And I think that because we have an active transportation plan, I think that it really fits in well. And So for those reasons, I won't be supporting this tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor McDermott.
Yeah, I guess I have to echo what both Councillor Butler and Councillor Dubanow have said. I don't really think this is an appropriate use of this property itself. Plus, being that there's not been a whole lot of studies done on storage needs, I find it very difficult to believe that we're in a storage shortage, that we should have back-to-back storage facilities. And, you know, I believe that this plan is coming a little bit late for this. The first plan by Mr. Annunziata has come in and is being processed. It's another good reason not to move this forward too. If this was a storage facility that was going to be out in Ridgeway, where they don't have one, or out in Stevensville, I might think better of it. But I don't really believe that we should be having back-to-back, and that last backing into a commercial zone that could be very important, not only to the people who own the property, but to the benefit of the taxpayers as well. So I won't be supporting this either tonight.
Thank you. Anything further from any other councillors? Your worship?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I've had concerns about this since the beginning. I'm particularly concerned about the need, particularly after having heard where Mr. Annunziata is with his plan immediately to the south. Not sure that I recognize the need. And if there is no need, I don't know how we can establish a rationale for changing a commercial use to something that isn't currently permitted, requiring a change to the official plan and the zoning bylaw. I have an issue with respect to the implications for the density targets with respect to this. This is like warehousing, take up a lot of space and don't provide a lot of jobs. And one of the things that we're trying to do here is create a community that can provide a variety of things, including some employment for young people or for people who already live here. So shifting that burden of over 180 jobs, if this were to be approved, to somebody else with no cost implications to this developer doesn't seem to me to be particularly fair. In view of the confusing information we were given about who owns which of these various parcels, either to the west or to the north, I'm not sure that we would even have the ability in this locale to bump up the density so that at least we've covered it on this one parcel. So I'm not really prepared to support this. I think that there are, as the other councillors have mentioned, much better potential uses here within the commercial zoning. So I'm not going to support this evening either.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments, any other comments? I'm seeing none, so I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That report is defeated. That brings us to report number PDS 44-2020, Amendment to Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw number 129-90, Housekeeping Amendment. Can I have a mover? Mayor Redekop. That's on the floor for comments or questions. Mayor Redekop.
Madam Chair, the only thing I would address is the notification, how we get this out. We've done a very good job in making sure that people who are going to be affected by housekeeping amendments are given direct notification. Much of these are really housekeeping. They're simply clarification. There's some minor changes that it will be very, very difficult to identify who's going to be affected as a property owner. So I would ask, and I've spoken to Ms. Dolch about this, that we, aside from the newspaper, our website, our social media, the other things that we do, that we also consider sending notification of these changes to the local real estate companies and law firms so that they can at least notify potential customers or clients, and possibly the Chamber of Commerce as well. I understand that we already post these in the libraries. So those are the things that I would ask we do just to make sure we broadcast these changes as much as possible.
Okay, and I see Ms. Dolch is taking notes there, so I'm guessing she's captured that.
Through you to his worship, yes, we will ensure that we provide additional notification to those groups before the recommendation report comes forward.
Okay. Anything further, Mayor Redekop?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. I just wanted a definition of landscaping, because in one of the parts it talks about minimum landscaping in front yards of a residential zone. So 30% of the yard of a residential zone has to be landscaped. What's the definition of landscape?
Mr. Butler, did you want to comment on that, or Ms. Dolch?
Yeah, through you to the councillor, that would generally be lawn, even walkways, patios, kind of soft surfaces, essentially anything probably but the driveway.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that carries. Are there any items of new business or inquiries? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been receiving a flurry of activity with letters from homeowners with respect to short-term rentals and policy change requests. I'm just wondering if the clerk gets copies of those, or if the Director of Planning has received any copies of those, and if we should be directing all of those emails to the Planning Director, because I know that she's coming up with a new policy, or an update rather, with respect to short terms.
Ms. Dolch, did you want to comment on that? And then I can go to Ms. Schofield.
Sure. Through you to the councillor, I am getting a lot of copies. I don't know if I'm getting all the correspondence, but I am getting quite a bit of emails with regard to the concerns on short-term rentals. And we will attach those to that future report that will be coming forward for your review and comment.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And just one further question,
Sure.
Chair. Just as a reminder, when is that report coming forward again?
Through you to the councillor, we're looking before the end of the year, if not early next year. But right now, depending on the loads on each agenda, we'll determine, but hopefully before the end of the year is our plan.
Thank you.
Are there any other inquiries or items of new business? Mayor Redekop?
Thank you, Chair. With respect to the item that Councillor Butler had raised with the short-term rentals, my intention is to at least respond to the various individuals that have contacted us to let them know what Ms. Dolch has just indicated, so that they're aware that we've received them. And I know that a lot of them came from one area of the town, but there are others, I'm sure. So I was going to do that. I will copy councillors so that you get the information. It'll be one letter that will go out to each of the residents individually, but it'll be, if you read one, you'll have read them all.
Thank you. That brings us to the business status report. Is there any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will hand the chair back to you, Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. And that takes us to Infrastructure Services, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure Services is now in session. There are no presentations and delegations. There are no reports. That brings us to new business inquiries. Does anyone have any business inquiries? Seeing none, I have an inquiry about Burger Road. And I did have a chance to talk to Mr.
Councillor Noyes.
I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Listen, I just want to share a comment and say what a great job Infrastructure Services did with the new signs that are appearing throughout town. They're beautiful, and it was well worth the wait. So thank you.
Been my pleasure.
Mr. Okay, any further comments or questions from anyone? Looking again for hands. Seeing that, I do want to bring up a question about Burger Road. Mr. Walsh and I did have a chance to discuss this earlier today. It came up as a question that I had in our last infrastructure meeting, and about what's going on with Burger Road. As you know, that the amount of trucking that occurred in the last short while has done significant damage to the road. And Burger Road's a road that the residents waited years to get redone. It was done, I think, about a year and a half ago, if I'm not incorrect, around there. And now it is in bad shape again. And the cost, I understand, is going to be around $250,000 to fix it. And I was wondering who's going to be paying for it. And I'm not sure we know who's going to be paying for it. And I had a chance to talk to also Mrs. Dolce, and I don't really know what the process is, what the mechanism is to get those who damaged the road to repay it, even if we can. But I also think that knowing that this has happened once, that there should be some safeguards put in place on our roads. Or, it's a huge asset for the town that that would prevent this from happening again. That those who damage the road are responsible for repairing it, and that we have some checks and balances in to make sure that occurs. I don't know if Mr. Walsh wants to comment on Burger Road and also with the timeline. I'm hoping that these residents aren't going to have to wait, a long time for their road to be fixed, since they waited a long time in the first place.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as you correctly note, Burger Road is in very rough condition. Again, the original we put on there was in the summer of 2019. Unfortunately, the damage was done too late in the season this year to address it properly. So we will be addressing it in 2020. Just so council knows where we're coming from right now, we will be putting in a separate budget item for the repair of Burger Road. Further, we will be taking all actions that we can, whether they're through negotiation or legal means, so that the residents or the ratepayers of Fort Erie are on the hook for this as little as possible. We do have an agreement with the owner of the property. I haven't seen the details of it yet. We do have a damage deposit on our roads. To me, that means they've accepted responsibility for it. Whether we can get the additional money out of them, I think is a different conversation. But as to further actions in general, myself, our CAO Tom, and my managers that are involved in road management are as upset as you are, I believe. And we're looking to make changes to our policies so that we catch this before it happens next time. Policies will be put in place. For example, our surface treated roads are no heavy trucks, period. And if you want to bring in a series of loads, you've got to fill out a permit, and we can control the process in that way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. See, any other comments or questions? That brings us to our new business. To the new
Zanko.
business. Councillor Zanko.
Councillor Zanko.
I don't know why I can't see your hands.
You're not looking
That's
up.
okay.
That's why.
Thank you. I just actually threw you to Mr. Walsh, and I mean, I guess this question or comment affects planning as well. But on that note, it seems to be that this is happening often, and I know I'm dealing with similar issue on Pound Road. That road is you're not allowed to have heavy construction vehicles, yet there's a development in behind, and every single day I receive complaints from residents because there's not only daily, all day long, heavy equipment. The contractors aren't following the designated road that's on Nathaniel, but their road, it was already in bad shape. Now it's even worse shape, and it always seems to me there's really nothing that we can do. I know that I've talked with you, Mr. Walsh, with regard to when that road will be replaced, but it just seems not fair to the taxpayer when these developers are are, not following what our rules are as a municipality, then the burden lays on the taxpayer. So I know you had said that, you're developing some policy going forward, but I think this is a really important topic, and, it's something that we need to look at right away.
I agree. Through you, Madam Chair. We're hoping to bring this in before spring.
Thank you. Mayor Redekop.
Well, just on that point, surely we have the ability to post a limit for weight on some of these roads that can't handle heavy trucks. Can we not do that on Pound Avenue? I mean, I don't know why they would take Pound Avenue. There's Garrison Road and there's Nathaniel. But can we not post a weight limit?
Mr. Walsh?
We can, and Pound Avenue came up in a discussion between Kira and myself this afternoon. By repeated attempts by planning and development to communicate with the builder in there, they still do it. We can put up all the signs we want in the world. You can just drive through a sign. In Burger Road, the actions had gone on for 2 or 3 days before we got notification that something funny was going on out there. At that time, the road was wrecked already. So I'm expecting that our policy will include penalties such that we can when we catch these guys, we can take appropriate action to get the road restored at their cost, not at the residents and businesses of Fort Erie.
Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, so there's a reason why the developer might want to cooperate with the municipality because they're building, and in order to build, you need a permit. And so I would like to think that they're at least understanding that their bread is also being buttered here. So perhaps you or Ms. Dolch could speak to the developer and explain to them the problem that we've got with respect to Pound Avenue. I'd also still like you to look at whether we can post something with respect to weight, because that road isn't built for heavy trucks or heavy equipment for sure. They just built a brand new Green Acres Drive, which could handle presumably the heavy traffic off of Garrison Road, and they've had to build Nathaniel. There was a purpose for us compelling them to do that, and I think we should take some more strident action if we can to get them to use that route. That's all I've got to say on that topic.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Anything else? Mr. Walsh, based on the questions that were just asked, and who does the enforcement on the roads currently now, like if they're above the weight limit, the load limit and things like that, and they're not, who enforces?
We would actually have, Madam Chair, we would have to call the Ministry of Transportation. They would then direct the vehicle to the closest weigh scale, which I believe is in Vineland. Information of the load on the truck and issue fines from there. It's not an easy process.
Doesn't sound like it. Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, I'd like to do the new business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, infrastructure services is now closed. I'll turn the chair back over to Mayor Redekop.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. That takes us to corporate and community services and Councillor McDermott. And I see that you have a delegation, and hopefully Ms. Nagy is still standing by.
Thank you, Your Worship. So corporate and community services is now in session. Under presentations and delegations, we have Carol Nagy, the Executive Director of Hospice Niagara, to come and speak to us about a funding request for residential hospice Niagara expansion, report number CAO 18-2020. Carol, welcome to Council.
Thank you very much, I think Chair McDermott, and to all council members, and to Mayor Redekop. Thank you for having me at Council tonight. We have some exciting news. If I can share my presentation with you tonight.
That's great.
And I'm hoping everybody can see this on their screens. Okay, so I'm not going to read it to you verbatim, but we have been experiencing, as I'm sure everybody living in Niagara knows, a growth in the number of people who are in an older demographic, as well as a growth in the number of people who are living with chronic illnesses in Niagara. At Hospice Niagara, we have 10 hospice residence beds in St. Catharines on Ontario Street. And 2.5 years ago, our board certainly realized that in all the referrals that we received for those 10 beds from across the region, we were only able to serve a quarter of those people. And we made a lot of changes to improve our intake process and try to expedite people getting into those beds. But every time we made improvements, there was more people that were being referred. So we've really never been able to get on top of that, only being able to serve one quarter, which is approximately 250 to 300 people each year that would use the hospice residence. We also have a number of community programs that continue to increase by about 40% in their need across the region. So we certainly had to do something as far as growth. Now, what came to our expansion, what came to our opportunity were 2 long-term care homes in Fort Erie, one in Fort Erie, one in Welland, that were due to expansion. So we have been in dialogue with them for about 2 years, looking at as an opportunity to build in a sustainable way and to take advantage of the economies of scales, where in Fort Erie, Gilmore Lodge is expanding and building over 230 beds, I believe, and we're building 10. And so this provides an opportunity for a not-for-profit small organization like Hospice Niagara to advantage the site construction that's happening at a lower cost when we partner with a not-for-profit long-term care home. In Fort Erie, there's a particular interest that we have in serving the Indigenous community and also recognizing that Fort Erie is an underserved community. So, you know, it's easy to build hospices in communities where there's a large economic base, but it's not as easy in communities that are underserved, yet it couldn't be more important to bring this service to Fort Erie, and is also making it accessible and culturally relevant and safe for Indigenous people. So we recently partnered with the Indigenous Health Network to work with us on these aspects of the project. We also recognize that in Fort Erie, there's a particular issue coming up probably when the hospital closes in Fort Erie. There's 5 end-of-life beds that are currently being offered in Fort Erie, and you're serving all of South Niagara in those beds, all the way from Wainfleet, Port Colborne, and then you're also getting any overflow from St. Catharines Hospital that we can't take into those beds in Port Colborne. Those beds are at risk of closing when the hospital moves to their new site. That would take those beds out of this area permanently. As well, we have 6 beds that are offered for the community right now at Hotel de Shaver Rehabilitation Hospital. The province has been very clear that that hospital cannot expand to any more bed capacity, and they're already behind by about 20 beds in order to serve the community. That will be a rehabilitation hospital primarily, without any further growth in end of life. So this is a critical service that we could be losing. It comes at a time before the pandemic, where we already knew that, and I'm going to work backwards on this slide here, that in Niagara we had only 3 beds per 100,000 when really we should be up to 7 or 10 beds per 100,000. This puts stress, of course, on the hospital, where more people, if you can't die supported at your own home, there's not a hospice bed for you, you're going to go to hospital. And we had the 2nd highest hospital cost in 1997 for acute palliative care at 118 million. That's the cost of people dying in hospital. Then we look at the number of people in those ALC, alternative level of care beds, that are actually waiting for a transfer out. And if we look at many of them, they're already deemed palliative and they end up dying in those beds before they can move out. We have in Ontario, prior to the pandemic, the largest emergency department provider in Ontario and the fourth largest average of hallway bed conditions in Ontario. Those are not good statistics for Niagara. So our beds, hospice beds, and increasing them to 30 across the region. And although they don't address all those issues, it's a step in the right direction for our community. If we look at the costs, and I won't go through everything on this slide, it's basically to say those 5 beds in the hospital that I'm talking about that you have right now are about $110,000 per day. We're offering hospice beds at half that price. So we're able to say you have 5, we're going to give you 10 for the region instead. And if we look at home care, hospice at home, that's $100 a day. So although we don't have funding for the complete project, we're still are working on that with the region. Once we put the hospice residences into the community, I am 100% sure that we're going to be able to attract doctors who practice in palliative care. We're going to be able to attract nurse practitioners. We're going to be able to start to offer those services in people's homes through our volunteers, and also then advocating with the Ontario Health Team, which will probably be in place at that point, that we need to continue to grow these community services and not always put all of this money to bricks and mortar. We're anticipating that, I should say, before when these beds actually go up and we increase by 30, that we would have at least 8,000 people served through the hospice residences and the community teams once we're in full service. Of course, Hospice Niagara has a phenomenal reputation due to the commitment of our staff and our volunteers, and we always receive high rankings in quality of care from our families and from the patients that we serve. The other part of our growth plan is to open in conjunction with Foyer Richelieu in Welland. That's the other site of the 10 beds, and that will be a hospice that is also bilingual. So we're able to look at serving our Francophone community. So together we're looking at making this enormous difference in Niagara. It's a one-of-a-kind model right now in Ontario, and I'm proud to say that the Ministry of Health has approved our growth plan by securing operational funding when these beds become open. And we're now working with the province to secure capital funding in a grant for both locations. This is the first step for Niagara. We'll be serving all of the region through these beds. We know that people will travel. These will be probably 20 minutes away, but that people will travel whatever they need to in order to get this kind of quality care within the region. We have started our capital campaign. It really is in the quiet phase right now. The target of the campaign is $14 million that we're hoping to raise. And just to put a perspective on that, most hospices that are opening now, which are 10-bed residential hospices that offer the community services as well, and some of that volunteer training, are costing anywhere between $10 to $14 million for 10 beds. When we're looking at, because of the economies of scale and partnering with long-term care, we're looking at both places will be a capital build of $14 million. So there's quite a savings that we're hoping to advantage. I've come tonight to council from my briefing report to ask you to support this plan. What we're asking for is a $4.83 per capita on the 2016 census for the population of Fort Erie. That puts this ask at approximately $150,000 over 3 years to support the capital build part of this project. And as I said, we've secured operational funds at the back end, and Hospice Niagara has a small but mighty fund development team that will then be in the community looking at how we continue to support the hospice going forward.
Well, thank you very much. The report was excellent, and I want to say this, but if we all take palliative care seriously in this town, we're very fortunate to have one of the best doctors in palliative care here. And I know that the work our health committee and the mayor have done to try and establish this within the system certainly hasn't gone unnoticed. Are there any comments or questions to Carol? Your worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott, and I certainly echo your comments. I want to thank Carol for all of her energy and for bringing this opportunity to Fort Erie. I know that her objective is to serve those in need, and certainly that fits in perfectly with the agenda that we've established as a council, and working in conjunction with our own dynamo, Joanne Ferricioli, we've been able to accomplish some pretty impressive things in terms of providing for the needs of our residents. This particular project with the palliative care beds, hospice beds in Fort Erie, connected with the new long-term care home that will be constructed, really brings life to the vision that we had when we committed several years ago, $300,000 towards the purchase of the old County Fair Mall property with a view to not only the long-term care facility, but other complementary and supplementary types of development. I don't think at the time we imagined hospice, but the day that Carol Nagy walked into Town Hall in Fort Erie was a good day. And as I teased her the other day, every time I see Carol Nagy, something positive I know is going to happen. So but the vision was that there would be some transitional housing, some affordable housing, maybe some other medical facilities on that entire site, so that it would be a campus that we as a community could be proud of, and that it would help to build up the gateway that we've established at that end of the town and really regenerate the entire area. I can't thank Hospice Niagara or Carol or Joanne for the effort that they've put into this. This provides us with a tremendous opportunity. And Carol, thank you again very much for bringing this opportunity to us. And I'm very, very hopeful that we will support you, because this is a project that is terribly needed and one that will really help to give full meaning to what's going on at that new site. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for giving me an opportunity to ask that question.
No problem, Your Worship. Councillor Zanko and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Ms. Nagy. Thank you very much for the presentation. I agree with what Mayor Redekop had said. I was just curious, as Councillor McDermott had mentioned, with regard to one of, in my opinion, the best palliative care doctors around is Dr. Scher. So does your program kind of collaborate with his palliative care unit that he currently has, or how does that work?
Thank you. Dr. Scher has been planning along with us, and each hospice residence has a palliative care specialist or physician that would be providing the care, as well as the outreach program around pain and symptom management. So he's been planning right along with us.
Excellent. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate it. And I echo everybody's remarks as well. But I have a question for you with respect to the costs associated for one day. That floors me, to be honest with you. It's like getting a suite at a 5-star hotel. So I'm just wondering what, I know yours is considerably less than $1,100. I think you mentioned $546 an evening.
Yeah, yes, roughly.
One night. Can you just tell us what that includes?
Absolutely. So first of all, it includes everything that you have in a home, right? So it includes care for the patient. It also includes space for the family, food for both, hydro, all of those things. It also includes our staff. Now our staff, it's not like a hospital staff. We have 10 rooms, and at all times we have no less than 2, but most times we have 3 staff on. During the day, we would have 4 staff on. And it's important to have that because conditions at end of life change quite rapidly. And we want to make sure that we are able to attend to those needs, as well as care at end of life. People become less able to help themselves, maybe to move as much as they could. So often lifting or changing somebody's position in a bed requires 2 people. We too pride ourselves in our health and safety record and want to make sure that everything is done safely. It also includes any other care needs that we might have that wouldn't be covered by the province. And lo and behold, right now it's PPE that we're having to purchase, or any specialty items that they would need. We receive no funding at all from the ministry in order to buy any of the equipment that we use, to repair the equipment, or to repair our facilities. So that cost would include all kinds of replacements and improvements. And running a 24/7 operation, you can imagine that things get used. We also want to make sure when people walk into hospice, it is brand new for them. It is not used. It doesn't look used. There's not a scuff on the wall, because to me, I take this personally, the care that we provide and we show to people is say, how can we take care of your loved one? So it includes all of those costs as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Nagy, thank you for the answer. I happen to agree with you. It's all about making a person feel comfortable at their end of life. I know that we went through that with my sister and my husband and a number of family members. And to have a service like that where the person is made comfortable and the family is made comfortable at the same time, it's priceless. So thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it.
Any more comments or questions? Seeing none. We're going to deal with your report next, Carol. Let's see where that goes.
Okay, thank you.
So could I get a mover on CAO 18-2020 funding request for a residential hospice Niagara expansion? Councillor Zanko, are there any comments or questions? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and far be it for me to disagree with what was already said. I think it was fantastic. Your comments, the mayor's comments, Councillor Zanko and Councillor Butler, I couldn't say it any better myself. I wanted to touch on the last sentence of page 3 of the report, which this really hits home to me. Fort Erie residents should not have to travel to St. Catharines for end-of-life residential hospice care. That sums it up to me. Not just the individuals who have lived their lives in this community and want to end their life in this community, but also the families. It's a difficult topic, but I know what it's like to travel back and forth in this kind of a situation. So it's hard for families. The municipality has made great strides to ensure that we offer these services in our community because it improves our quality of life. And for that reason, that sums it up for me. I will be supporting this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Are there any new business inquiries under corporate? Seeing none, I just want to reiterate to the people out there listening that the fire department did one heck of a job on the weekend with their food and bottle drive. And I suspect in the very near future, the chief will have all the data from that. But I know it was good. They had a couple of truckloads going to Cope and some money in just my corner. So I was very grateful for the work that all the firefighters did. And there was quite a number of firefighters helping out. And we thank them for that, Chief. If you could pass that on for council. So, anybody got anything on the business status report? Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Are there any meetings that anyone wishes to announce coming up this week? Councillor Noyes?
Not quite this week, but on October 28th, there's a traffic coordinating meeting at noon.
Okay, any other meetings? We've got another council meeting next Tuesday, so we'll have more meetings to announce then. If there are no other meetings, then I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Butler. Obviously, Councillor Dubanow saving his strength for later. All those in favor of adjourning? And that is unanimous. Okay. Madam Clerk, should I start the special council meeting right away?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Then I'm going to call the special council meeting to order. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship, with the exception of Councillor Lubberts.
Perfect. There are no announcements. There is no addendum. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, that takes us to motions. And Councillor Dubanow, you have a motion.
I do, Your Worship. Thank you. Just okay. Got to bring it up right here. Councillor Zanko, would you be willing to second this? Okay, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko, that council directs staff to open the existing access point from Nancy Street to the stormwater management pond property, and further, that the paved portion of the existing Nancy Street access point be extended to meet the existing stormwater management pond service road, and further, that staff consider a landscape buffer along the north and south edge of the Nancy Street access point to be included for consideration in the 2021 supplemental budget deliberations. I would like to speak to this, Your Worship, if given the opportunity.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is a bit of an interesting situation. Anyone who's familiar with Garrison Village will know that for many, many years, there was right at the end of Jasmine Court, right where it meets Nancy, there was a pathway that led nowhere. And it sat there for many, many years, and it was envisioned to become part of a stormwater management facility and pedestrian access. And a couple of years ago, we eventually got to that point where we were ready to construct that. And during that time, there was some concerns related to the construction of the property, and council decided to close the access. Since that time, the pond has been constructed. It's been mostly landscaped. There's an access road in there, and there's been an overwhelming outpouring from the residents in Garrison Village to open that access back up. Residents have expressed concerns about having to go over to Albany, which is a busier street, when they can access it directly off a quiet residential street. And more fundamentally, as our municipality grows, and as we see, more growth and more investment in our community, active transportation is going to be very important. We've seen it through COVID. I mean, we encourage everyone to get outside and, be physically distant, but exercise as best they can. And these kind of pathways and linkages matter. They promote pedestrian health. They promote safety, active transportation. It grinds my gears, so to speak, to see this access point closed off when there's so many in the community who want it in that neighborhood there open back up. And I'm certainly, as their councillor, I hear them loud and clear, and I support that request, and that's why I brought this forward. There is one last point, and I understand the with the concerns we have right now with the budget and with COVID and costs, because of the unique situation of where this access was open and then closed and then being asked to open again, there's been some concern from neighboring residents regarding privacy and just a change in the area. So I wanted to address their concerns and give council the opportunity to perhaps include this in the supplemental budget, so we could include some like almost a planted buffer. It's a very wide right of way. I know the one in my neighborhood is much narrower, and you wouldn't be able to fit any kind of trees or shrubs in there for privacy access, but this one's particularly wide. And considering the unique needs, I thought I would bring this to council for their consideration to perhaps include this in the supplemental budget, just as a goodwill gesture, considering what's happened. But regardless, I certainly hope council will support the reopening of this pathway. It goes towards all of our active transportation objectives and promoting walkable communities. And the residents would certainly appreciate having this approved. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubanow. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that I don't have a problem with reopening the pathway for the reasons that you mentioned, but I do really have a problem with a landscaped buffer being considered in budget deliberations, because I think it gives those residents an unfair advantage to other residents within our community who have asked for something similar and who have been turned down. So I'm wondering if, Your Worship, would it be okay to do a line by line that so that we can make a decision on that? On those lots.
Of course, yeah, you can deal with these individually. I would think that 1 and 2, paragraphs 1 and 2 could be dealt with together, could they not?
Yes, yes, I
So
agree.
we can deal with 1 and 2 together, and we can deal with 3 separately. Any other questions or comments? I think I saw another hand up. Councillor Noyes and then Councillor Zanko.
I'm just wondering, and thank you, Mayor Redekop, I'm just wondering what the cost would be. It doesn't sound like there'd be much cost of just opening up the road, but we don't have any costs associated with this motion. But if it was already opened already, but there's something about it, it sounds like there's going to have to be some pavement done. Any idea what the cost would be?
Mr. Walsh, would you have some idea about connecting the end of the current walkway with the walkway around the stormwater management pond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're looking at essentially a paved driveway, so under $10,000.
Thank you.
Councillor Zanko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. My question actually was very similar to Councillor Noyes. I was interested in the costs. I do agree with Councillor Butler with regard to the plants and the buffer, but I will support this motion simply because my understanding, infrastructure staff will bring those costs forward at budget time, and we can deliberate at that particular time, if I'm understanding this correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councillors? If not, then I'm going to proceed. We'll start with items, paragraphs 1 and 2. I'll call the question. All those in favor of supporting 1 and 2? None opposed. Then I'll go to paragraph 3, which deals with the landscape buffer. All those in favor? Opposed? So that is defeated. So 1 and 2 passed, 3 defeated. So there won't be a need for staff to look into that because that's been defeated. Okay. That takes us to the next motion. And Councillor McDermott, I wonder if I could hand the chair to you so that I can proceed with my motion. You did a great job with Ms. Nagy. Is there anyone who would be willing to second this motion? Councillor Zanko? May I proceed, Mr. Chair? Sorry. Okay, you guys are all muted, so I've given the chair to Councillor McDermott. So I may proceed? Okay. Whereas the town of Fort Erie has received multiple concerns from families that their loved ones are being discharged from hospital to retirement homes and not to long-term care homes. And whereas the town of Fort Erie recognizes long-term care homes considered part of the healthcare system are funded by the province along with resident copay requirements and have very specific legislation under the Long-Term Care Homes Act 2007 to ensure the care needs of residents are met. And whereas the town of Fort Erie recognizes that retirement homes are entirely funded through the payments of residents and can vary quite widely in cost, care, and housing offerings and quality, and that while they do have some oversight through Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority, that is not part of the legislation under the Long-Term Care Homes Act 2007. And whereas the long-term care homes have a formal complaint process with the Ministry of Long-Term Care to deal with complaints not satisfied by an internal complaint process. And whereas the private sector retirement homes do not have the same level of consistent family and patient satisfaction processes, complaint mechanism, clear health and safety protocols, or adequate methods for communicating with residents and families. And whereas the town of Fort Erie has concerns that the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed the inability of the long-term care homes to accept the high numbers of patients waiting for placement from complex and continuing care at hospitals. And whereas many of these patients are being discharged to the independent living retirement homes, where the level of on-site licensed registered nursing care is not adequate to meet the needs of these individuals. And whereas the town of Fort Erie feels that there is an opportunity and a need for Ontario Health to address the gap in care with provincially funded healthcare professionals on site in the retirement homes to ensure that residents receive the care that they require and deserve, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Fort Erie hereby requests that the province of Ontario investigate the level of on-site licensed nursing care being provided at the private sector retirement homes, and further, that the province of Ontario ensure patients are being discharged from hospitals to facilities that provide the level of care they require and deserve, and further, that the province of Ontario direct Ontario Health to ensure the appropriate level of care required by patients discharged from hospitals to retirement homes when long-term care accommodations are not available, and provide the necessary level of funding for Ontario Health to do so, and that the province of Ontario establish clear, consistent, and effective rules to regulate retirement homes as a vital component of the continuum of care as our residents age and require various care needs. And further, that a copy of this resolution be circulated to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Marilee Fullerton, Minister of Long-Term Care, the Honorable Christine Elliott, Minister of Health, and Niagara MPPs, the Regional Municipality of Niagara, and all Niagara area local municipalities for their support. And if I might, Madam or Mr. Chair, can I just make a couple of comments?
Absolutely.
This is obviously a lengthy preamble to a lengthy resolution, and I want to thank Joanne Ferraccioli for helping me with respect to this. And I'm sure others of you have received calls from family members expressing concerns about the level of care in some of the retirement homes. Some retirement homes are excellently run. Others have challenges. One of the big problems with the pandemic is that it has, as Ms. Nagy had previously mentioned, put a lot of stress on hospitals, and in particular, individuals who are occupying beds that are required by others are being moved in many cases, if long-term care beds aren't available, to retirement homes, which really weren't designed for the level of care that some of these individuals require. It's really a matter of making sure that the healthcare professionals required are available, and that's a responsibility of the provincial government. So along with all of the other challenges that the government has met as a result of the pandemic, this is one that has been laid bare. And to ensure that there is a consistent and adequate transfer of individuals, if a long-term care bed is not available, to a retirement home, we need to make sure that there is the adequate nursing capacity available to attend to the needs of these individuals. Hence the motion, and hopefully something will come out of it. I'm sure that this is a problem that's being experienced across the province. I'm sure that there are other municipalities that are taking similar steps, but it's something that we can do, and I hope Council will support. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. That then takes us to a resolution to move into closed session. And Madam Clerk, should I wait until we've passed the motion to go into closed session, or should I ask the councillors now to confirm that they are alone and no one else will be privy to what we discuss?
I would suggest you ask it now, and then we'll pass the
Okay.
motion, and then we'll go into closed session.
Okay, so I'm going to ask each of you to respond in the affirmative with an answer to, and I think all of you have the format as to what you're supposed to answer. The question is, before we begin this evening, I need each member that is attending electronically to confirm that no one else is present with them and that they are not recording this portion of the meeting. And you will all respond if that is true. I confirm I'm alone and I'm not recording the meeting. I'll start with Councillor Zanko because on my screen, you're the councillor right next to me.
I do confirm that I'm alone and I'm not recording the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Dubanow, you're next.
Confirm I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Councillor Noyes.
I can confirm that I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Councillor McDermott.
I'm alone in the room and I'm not recording the meeting.
Thank you. And Councillor Butler.
I confirm I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Thank you. So with that, Councillor Butler, you have the motion for us to move into closed session.
I do. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council does now go into closed session at 8:15 p.m. to discuss the following. A, pursuant to section 2392B of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, regarding a performance evaluation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about that? Going into closed session, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is unanimous. So we will then wait for our technology team to put us into a separate cyber room or whatever.
Yes, Your Worship. Tonight, I'm going to ask that staff members not attending the closed session, please leave Zoom. So I think I've given you notification prior.
So you now have us in our own little room, or you're putting us there?
Not quite yet. I'll let you know when the room is secure and the right people are there. I'm going to invite our human resources manager in.
And in the meantime, can I alert members of council that there was an email circulated late today by Ms. Morden that provided some information relative to the performance evaluation?